Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Smart Living Lunch. Thank you, Laura, for the organization. We have the pleasure today of hearing the talk by Julia Cunha, and it will be our pleasure to hand the floor to Stephanie Teufel, Professor Teufel, for the introduction of the talk.
Yeah, hello together. It's nice to see you. And unfortunately, I also was planned to be in the Hall Bleu, but you can see I decided to get a cold after 2 years and yeah, stay a little bit at home. So it's the same situation we had the last 2 years to see each other online. And it's my pleasure to introduce Julia. Yeah, you know Julia, and she is a part of the Smart Living Lab since almost 2 years. And yes, the topic she's talking, it's very current because as we can see, especially also now in the moment in Glasgow, we really have to deal more with the solution of social dilemmas in the future. I think this is something which is foreseen. And unfortunately, which is the research topic of social innovation. And this whole it's always been a little bit neglected because it's complicated, it's complex, it's not so easy to do like a product innovation or a process innovation. These social innovation, it's always a little bit, you can't measure it right. So this is something, but we need this to overcome social dilemmas. I think this is something, and that's where Julia comes in with her dissertation topic. She wants to develop a toolbox to solve social dilemmas, measuring something which is interesting. And this is her starting point. I think Julia has already been working on this topic for some time. And one thing she realized is that there's still a lot to do because it's such a not a really good research topic, and you can find you can find things, but I think the main is really to find the toolbox of a set of tools where you can actually be sure that you have a certain success to solve social dilemmas. So hopefully I made quite the right statement for your research, and I would like to hand over to Julia for her talk.
Thank you very much, Professor Teufel. I will share my screen. I hope this works. So is it possible to see? It's all good? Perfect.
Yes, all good.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for joining me today in this presentation. I think someone has the mic on, so we have some background sound. Okay. So this presentation is called The Toolbox to Solve Social Dilemmas, as presented by Professor Teufel. This is the topic, this is the title of my PhD thesis. And I will go through a little bit what we have been researching at the iimt about social innovation in the last year. And well, you can ask me questions anytime. And also at the end of this presentation, of course, we can have a debate about social innovation. So look. Okay, so very shortly about myself. I am a PhD student at the iimt. Professor Teufel is my supervisor. I'm doing my PhD on innovation and technology management. I started last year. It was also last year that I graduated in my master's. I did my master's also at the University of Fribourg in business communication and information technology. But my background is communication journalism. So I did my bachelor studies in Brazil. And I worked a few years as a reporter, and then since I live in Switzerland, I kind of shifted a bit more to management and now innovation, which is a topic very dear to my heart, which I find it very interesting. And at the iimt, I share my time between writing the PhD thesis and doing my own research. on social innovation, and also working for the department in the researches that the IMT is doing, and also supporting students in their master studies and the courses. And these ideas at IMT, this picture that I have here is just for a very short publicity. We have a project that for a few years has been very successful of entrepreneurship for all the students that study at the University of Fribourg. It was for entrepreneurship, so anyone that has an idea could come and they would get support for the ideas at IMT. And now this program has shifted to a prize award for the best innovative ideas on campus. So if anyone is interested in knowing more, please access our webpage or also write me and we can talk about it. So a very brief agenda for today. There will be an introduction about social innovation. I will talk a little bit about the background and significance of this research field. I will present my research design and methods, and then my preliminary findings, some parallel research that we're doing at the IMT, and then we can go for questions. So the introduction is a bit about innovation, so a bit to understand where did this start. And I found a very interesting study about human behavior, and they say that our ability to innovate and to incorporate these innovations into our social life is one of the main characteristics that differ us from other species. So this innovation skills that we have are very particular for humans, and they can be seen since the early beginning of mankind. So they in this study of Sims, he mentioned specifically social innovations, which could be then considered in early times as spiritual beliefs, and then later on the formation of countries and to a globalized world. And then technical innovations, which is something that we hear more about, which then could be a Stone Axe on early times, and now instant communication, just to bring a few examples. And how did it evolve? And now a bit more on social innovation itself. So until the 19th century, scientifically, there hasn't been much or pretty much anything about social innovation. And then we have this French sociologist, Gabriel Trade, that published, he was interested in innovation and on differing innovation and imitation. And he was the first one to mention the social aspect of innovation. So he mentioned in his work social change as one of the effects they're connected with innovation. And then we have this intellectual, Joseph Schumpeter, which is an Austrian economist. And he's very important also for the studies of innovation. And he mentioned, he was studying the role of innovation in producing structural change, also inside organizations and in the society. So we have always this connection with innovation and the social effects that innovation would bring. But it was around the 70s and the 80s that this research really gained traction, and it started being developed by very different communities. So the community of psychology, they started researching social innovation. Strategic niche management, they started also looking at social innovation, different aspects. And social entrepreneurship is now related with social innovation, social economy as well, social movements as well. So this started in the 70s and 80s, and currently in the last 10 years specifically, this study of social innovation, it grew also with a growth of investments coming from European Union, or for in the US with the administration of Obama that created a fund to research social innovation. So there has been a growth on the studies and the literature of social innovation. However, because it is so it's disseminated among different research communities, this makes the topic still very fragmented, And the field is considered anyway still understudied, which is interesting. Although there has been interest in social innovation, you cannot compare the amount of information you have on technical and commercial innovation and social innovation. It has been left a bit to the side. So to define social innovation, because probably is not something we are used to define, and there is a difficulty in this definition. When we study innovations itself, commercial, technical innovations, we also say it's hard to get a definition for innovation. Everyone or every paper you read brings a different definition of innovation. However, if you have to explain innovation to someone, you can say it briefly is the successful exploitation of new ideas. So there is a general understanding that if you have an innovation, you not only have a new idea, but you can make it happen. So you could implement somehow, you have a prototype, you have an example of this service or product, and there has a degree of success into it. So we can discuss what successful means here, but just an idea is not an innovation. So if you can execute this idea, then you have an innovation. And when you define social innovation, it gets even more complicated than having a definition for innovation. And the thing is, when you have an innovation, a technical innovation, it can also involve a social process. So if you think social innovation, okay, it's an innovation that has something social to do with it, but any technical innovation could also be social or bring a social effect. And every social effect that you have in our community could also be described as innovative. So there is already a barrier here to understand what is then a social innovation and how can you describe a social innovation. So I got three different looks on social innovation from different authors. So maybe this helps us combining the aspects. So the first of all, from France, 2012, it's the idea that it's a new product, service, or process that will create a more effective or efficient social practice. So this is one aspect. And then we have another researcher saying that it's a social innovation will increase people's living standards. It will amplify the society's capacity to act and connect unanswered demands to new ideas. So there's also a point of view that you can use for describing social innovation. And lastly, another one that I found interesting, the several researchers that use the same understanding. They think it's addressing a social need by transforming relationships. So you have different actors in society and you address a social need by transforming the relationship that they have between them. So it's somehow a bit complicated already, the definition, but I will go into the background and the significance to show how understanding and studying social innovation is important, especially nowadays. So there's a belief, and it's pretty relevant in all scientific studies, of the potential of social innovation to act on social challenges. And here we can have all the sustainable development goals as a list of deep-rooted problems that we have nowadays. So we have, for example, climate change, we have economic inequality, education boundaries, we can say about gender issues, we can talk about good health. In any one of these big issues that we deal today, we have, we know and we feel it, that there's a difficulty of the current models and policies to address these problems. So this is the significance of social innovation, is try to address such problems from another perspective. So really use innovation and an innovative thinking to tackle these social needs and create some collaboration with society, that the society can also feel empowered to change this scenario. So quick opportunity and challenges. As we saw, there is a big potential to solve these deep-rooted issues. There has been an increase in investment, also in the number of initiatives. If you search for social innovation, now pretty much every country has an idea, and there are several groups working in how they can use social innovation. It's multidisciplinary and also interdisciplinary, which makes the field very interesting for researchers as well. And it's a broad field. That means there's a lot to be studied still. There's a need for this research. And then when we go to challenges, because it's such a vast and big field, there's also a lot of ambiguity in the research, fragmentation of the topic. There's the difficulty of reaching a good definition or conceptualization for social innovation. There's different intellectual communities acting into this field. So sometimes it's difficult to reach everything that has been written about. And there's an unclear path for researchers and practitioners, especially. And there's also the difficulty that Frau Teufel introduced at the beginning. It's very difficult to measure results. So when you create a social effect, how can you measure this social effect? How can you separate this social innovation that you brought from the whole, from the society itself? It's something difficult to measure. So some practical examples of what can be understood as social innovation. So maybe here it's a clear picture. We have the year 2020, so last year, Finland offered the parents, so dads, the same parental leaves as the mothers. And this is can be considered as a social innovation because it's an attempt to tackle this gender inequality. And we have on the other side, Microsoft in Japan that started, I think this is also 2000, I think it was even 19. They reduced 1 year day of, sorry, 1 day work a week. And they realized that with 4 days work in a week, the productivity increased by 40%. So it was also this attempt to balance the life-work situation. So how can they improve the life of employees? And they tried this and the productivity augmented. And here there's some local examples. I took some from a newspaper from Bern. So the first one here is a garden that was created in Elfenau, and this is a public garden. So it's for people to learn about the soil and to meet as a community and try to plant their own food and talk about how you know, how this seasonal plantations work. And this is a different understanding of what we produce and where our food comes from. And it's also space for the community. And we have, in parallel, we have also the students of UNIFR that created inside the ideas at iimt this very similar idea already in 2019, the Jardin de Permaculture, and it's in Perol. It was a public, it's a place that belongs to the university, a big grass area that wasn't used before, and they could reinvent the space to be a space of meeting of students and where they can work together and somehow try to create a positive effect, even if very local, on climate change and discuss what they can do about it. So the last example is also a school in Münzigen, I think, and this it's a canton Schule, and they are working with students to implement this solar panels. So this is different examples of what social innovation can also be. So now going for my research, design and methods. I divided my PhD in 3 main blocks. And I have a research question for each one of these blocks. I will address it later. But just to give a big picture, the first research question is, what are the tools and frameworks for developing a social innovation? So my goal is to look in the literature of social innovation and try to understand what has been done so far, because it's so fragmented, it's so spread. So what are the tools and frameworks that we can already use when we want to develop a social innovation, or when we have a social innovation implemented, but we want to improve it? So what has been written scientifically that can be used? As a second point is what kind of methods, also tools and frameworks from commercial and technical innovation that we can use and adapt to foster social innovation. So since this field of commercial and technical innovation has been developed further, or further more than social innovation, maybe there are some tools and methods that we can use also for developing social innovation. And the last point on the PhD thesis then is the last block. What are the success factors identified in real case studies? So I will come in detail about this question later, but this is the practical part of the PhD thesis, and I think it's the biggest contribution that I intend to bring with this research, which is trying to apply this toolbox that will be created with all this theoretical research, try to apply these tools in a real case scenario and understand if we can measure the success factors because of the implementation of these tools. So here are the three blocks that I presented before with the research questions. So the first one is social innovation, the second block, commercial and technical innovation, and the third block is then a study case and the creation of this toolbox. So the first block is the method that I will use is to perform a systematic literature review. So really investigate deeply in the literature what has been published, what has been done, especially looking into tools and frameworks, something more practical to develop and foster social innovation. And here is something very, very similar, but in the parallel field. So to study also a systematic literature review on commercial and technical innovations, focus on the frameworks and try to adapt them to fit social innovations. And here's the third block, and this is somehow still opened because from all the literature review, this toolbox will be created. All these frameworks and tools will be available for any research or practitioners to just access and take what they think they need for their social innovation. But as well, it will be the implementation of these tools into a study case. This study case, it hasn't been defined yet, so there's still a few more months ahead to define what will be the study case that we'll use. And I think also the reading and the literature will kind of bring away, as well as the new researchers that are joining, for example, with their master thesis and the papers we have been publishing. So maybe this all comes together and a clear study case will be defined, but it's still open. So preliminary findings. So this is interesting because my supervisor, Professor Teufel, hasn't seen it yet, but it's really very preliminary. To address the first block, which is focused on social innovations, I started with a smaller sample to see if my method would be consistent and would be a good method to apply for the whole first block. So I took a systematic review based on Mora and al. 2017, which has 3 specific levels of defining a selection of the sample. And I looked only in the Science Direct's research articles from 2002 to 2020. This, of course, can be and will be expanded later. But then the goal of this research was then to identify this scientific articles that were published on social innovation and using or presenting a new tool or framework. So the first level was identifying in this database what are these social innovation scientific articles. So we had 2,000 papers. Second level was then to identify which ones have in the title social innovation. So they're specifically about social innovation and not only bring it somewhere in the paper. Then it's already less than 100. And then when we take a look which ones has included in the title, abstract, or has as a keyword specified by the author the words tool or framework, then we have 30 or almost 30 papers. So you see that it's also a difficulty to find such models still for social innovation. If you perform the same sample selection on innovation, technical innovation, I believe this number will be a lot higher. But this is just initial research, and it's only on Science Direct, so there's a chance that I will perform the same research in different sources, and we can increase this number a little bit. From this sample that was selected, this is actually interesting. These papers, they were 53.3% focused on European cases. So they were focused on social innovation, but they brought an example, or they were focused on Europe, on countries inside Europe. And just 6.7 were on Central America, 26.7 Asia. And here when we have global, this means that they considered several countries and continents in their research. So it was difficult to say exactly where they were from. When we try to understand what are the topics they are connecting with social innovation, then 33.3% are general. I will bring an example what this means, but they're more focused on social innovation topic in a wide or big, with a big regard on the theory and not really specific on one case. But we have social innovation connected to rural areas with 26.7%. So it's the development of rural environments in different countries. And then we have 20% we're connecting social innovation with health, 6.7 high tech, same for cities and same for energy. So some titles to make it easier to understand what they're talking about. So here we said rural areas, and this is one example, 2020 in Italy, a study that was the network impact of social innovation initiatives in marginalized rural communities. So really to bring development to these regions. When we said here health, 20%, this is an example in Japan, 2015. This is a paper, Social Innovation Through Dementia Project, using innovation architecture. And lastly, I have here in general, this is, for example, a study published in Spain, 2015, that created a tool to measure the user experience on a social innovation. So a social innovation has been implemented. How can you understand from the perspective of the user? Still, this is, all the studies were divided in 3 blocks. The frameworks and tools that could be implemented before a social innovation project. So what you have to do before you start. So 35.7% of the studies were targeting this early beginning of a social innovation. Then during a social innovation, these were 57.1 of the studies. You can use these tools and frameworks while you are developing your project, and just 7.1% were studies for after you have implemented. So an example for how after is how to measure a result or value of a social innovation. So there's not much written about how to measure this results, because it's a difficult thing to do. And 57% was during. So these are the steps and the process that you can use from start to scale a social innovation project. And then before, creating a social innovation project is the analysis of the ecosystem for creating such a solution. Here now, no longer PhD, but parallel research on social innovation that we're doing. We have a partnership with the University of Alicante, Spain, and this was the only paper that I showed before that created this tool focused on the user perspective of a social innovation. So we thought it was very interesting, for example, to analyze what happened during the COVID pandemic, which is something everyone is still affected by, and we're still living the situation. So here was trying to focus, trying to understand, as the distance learning was implemented in Switzerland, how did this affect the studies in the University of Fribourg? So it's from their perspective, and the application of this tool is quite of it's a questionnaire, and I can show here. There are 3 different perspectives. So from a rational point of view, from a sustainability point of view, from an emotional point of view, they will answer how did this social innovation, we can consider it a social innovation, distance learning. So how did this affect their life on their perspective? And what this tool brings is, hasn't been done yet, so we still hadn't submitted the questionnaire to the students. However, when we get the results, they will appear in such a graphic form. And this is very interesting. If this cube is very proportional, this is something as a positive result. So the social innovation has been well implemented in all these 3 aspects. And if this cube is somehow flattened or has a disproportional shape, as we see on the right side, this is then an imbalanced score, shows that this social innovation has then a negative perception by the users. So this can be very interesting for the university itself, if they intend to give courses online, or if they want to understand what they did wrong, what they could improve, and how this distance learning can be done or performed in the future, or not, or how it was, anyways, to understand how it was for the students this period. Another parallel research, and this is very brief, we have a master's student that started also her studies now, and she wants to apply one of these frameworks that was developed in 2020. So it's an analytical framework. She wants to apply it in order to start a social innovation project in BL, and she wants to develop a generation house. So her idea is to have a space where elderly people can exchange with kids. It doesn't exist still in BL, and it will be something positive for the people that are older, and they can exchange their knowledge with kids that are younger, and they can also perhaps help with technology, or they have a positive effect of playing together and understanding one another. And this also brings a positive effect for the parents that live there. So it can be understood as a social innovation, and this will be a practical example, and she will use one of these theoretical frameworks to try to improve and see the challenges of developing this project. So this is it. I talked a lot. I hope you're all still awake, that I didn't bore you with all the details of the theory. But I think it was quite interesting to bring all these different aspects, and we can have now discussions or questions.
So I have one which is quite perhaps to do a little bit the relation to the Smart Living Lab. I think this Alicante tool, if we can, which we're using in the moment, or we're trying to do research with the university and the students and this COVID-19 and distance learning, I think this is a tool afterwards which could be also used very nicely in the topics, or for topics of the Smart Living Lab, because it's really the user is in the focus, and you can see if you're innovations, your new ideas, perhaps also how the new working places are in the future is used, or is really, is it a social innovation for customers? And the other thing, it's also interesting, this analytical model in which we using, or this student is using now in Biel, is also something interesting for us, also in topics for Smart Living Lab, because it's about a new house, new generation house. We could use it also for our new house building afterwards, and we could also try to use this analytical model for smaller questions, like we have the lightning or something like that. I think it's more that we have always this more or less technical process product innovation, but we also have what we would like to have, especially in smart living, is also the social dimension. And I think this is the tools we are now trying to find out how we could use them in general, but especially also for Smart Living Lab. That's only a comment I would like to do. Any other questions?
Yes, I would have a question, if I may. Yeah, so yeah, I'm working at the ENAC faculty at EPFL. So I really enjoyed your talk, because we also try, of course, to motivate and support our researchers with their innovation and new ideas. But we link them, of course, to sustainable solutions. So it's all about sustainability approach, and so the faculty is, of course, has a little bit of a delay compared to other faculties where technology was developed, like the engineering but in environment is a little bit of a delay, because it was not always about having immediately a new product. But now with of course the sustainability development goals and more societal concerns, we see that we really have a lot of opportunities. And I was just wondering if you could comment on, for you, if we use social innovation and there is also this societal readiness level. I don't know if you heard about this, because normally in normal technology, we use the technology readiness level to define how far the product is already evolved. But now I see that more and more we also have this SRL, so societal readiness level, which also has, of course, a social aspect to it. So I was just wondering if you can maybe comment on this difference of using social and societal innovation.
Well, if I understood your question, you want to know if there is a difference on the social studies in general and the social innovation, that is?
It's just the use of the wording, because everything is a bit, if you're not specifically doing research on social aspects, you very often say, well, it needs to be good for society. And society is, of course, full of social aspects. So also for me, when I say, well, it needs to have a societal, so it's a lot of societal concerns. So your product or your service that you're developing needs to serve in a sustainable way for the society. But now you are using this social innovation, and I was just wondering, is this the way to go, or can we just also continue using societal innovation and societal
This is very interesting, because at the beginning of my research I created a mind map to connect all the topics, to write down all the topics that are connected with social innovation. And my mind map did like this. So all the studies that have something social to do with it, they somehow can be written as a social innovation. So there's transformative social innovation, and you have also corporative social responsibility that can be connected with social innovation. So at the end, depending on how you're analyzing your study case or of the innovation you want to implement, you can use different theories and connect it with social innovation. So this is one of the difficulties, but also the positive aspects of the social innovation field, because it's so broad and so wide. Many researchers have been connecting this topic with different things, also with, like I said, with psychology. So you have psychological studies connected with social innovation, because of course, if you produce a social effect, you can study psychology as well, and also the theories connected with psychology. So I think it's a matter of the development of the field, that the field will get stronger, and maybe it just embraces all this other theories, or maybe they will be, with time, it will be more clear what we can put under social innovation and what we cannot put under social innovation. So when I first started thinking about the application of this tool for the COVID-19 and the distance learning, I thought, can we actually consider the distance learning as a social innovation? Because distance learning already existed, and we're not bringing education to people that couldn't have access to education. So can we consider it? And then I found some definitions that said, if you're meeting a social need and creating new social relationships, it is a social innovation. So there are many aspects that you can bring the research to connect with social innovation. But this is only positive if the tools that you have available for developing a social innovation are there and they're really useful. And that's also what I want to look at. Is this developed enough? Do we have these tools? Are these tools useful, or they're just frameworks, because there's so many frameworks and they have weird shapes and many arrows, and at the end, is this useful when I have a real case? Can I apply this? Can I have a good analysis coming from this framework? So I think it's also, when you said about the readiness level of an innovation, and this is also something when you look at the stages of development of an innovation, you have a few studies that show how it should be developed, how you can measure an innovation, and when you go to social innovation, the steps of the process, they're completely different depending on the author that you take. So sometimes there are 4 steps, sometimes there are 6, 7 steps. Which model is correct? So this answer doesn't exist yet. And I think that's why they say it's understudied, because although you have many papers written about it, you don't have something certain that you say, no, this author is very well recognized and we can always use this model, because there's always someone building on top of this old research, and it's very different what they're doing at the end. So I think it's a promising field, but there's difficulties. It's very difficult to give just one answer. And I think this is also a challenge. I don't know if it's more an opportunity or a challenge so far.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, but at least to make a short comment there also, it's good that we start to talk about societal innovation or readiness, because before we never thought about this in the society, and at least the humans who should have something from the innovations at the end. Yeah, so I think it's a wording problem or definition problem, but at the end, it's good that we're starting to see this point and have a look on that. Any other questions? Martin?
Yes, thanks, Julia. Really very nice talk. I was just wondering, actually coming back to the title of your talk here, where it was mentioning the social dilemma. Well, did I miss it, or did you not speak much about the social dilemma in itself, on what we actually understand under a social dilemma? Is it to any connection with this the famous movie that is, I think it was called The Social Dilemma, that was actually digging into the effects of the social social media, social networks?
It hasn't been connected with the movie, but it's something very that comes often in the social innovation studies. So they're always mentioning there's a potential to solve these dilemmas, and the dilemmas normally are, as I have seen listed, they're mainly the same ones as the UN has it. So the poverty and the hunger and bringing water and a healthy environment, and also about work and our work situation. But I do think that if there is a study connecting fake news and social innovation, this could also be a topic, but because at the same time, there is a social effect to fake news, for example, or how we use our media devices. So this is also something that I think can be under the same umbrella. Because it's so wide, I think it's difficult that we will find a topic that we think, this is not a social innovation. But it depends on the definition that you use. I think it's quite possible to stretch it a little bit and think, no, this can be a social innovation, or this is a social problem that could use a social innovation, for example. I don't know if I answered.
Absolutely, thanks.
Other questions or comments?
Well, given the breadth of the field, as you said, of the definitions of the social innovation, I'm sure many people and organizations are actively doing social innovation without even knowing, or without calling it social innovation. That they are doing something which the scholars would qualify as social innovation, but in practice, people don't necessarily think of it as being doing innovation. In that sense.
Yes, there's an interesting book that I found from an agency in UK, and they have an open book on social innovation. Mm-hmm. This is actually a slide that I left outside of the presentation, but it was published in 2010, and they're based on real social innovations that they found around the world, and they took all these examples and published in a book. And this is something similar to what I want to do with my PhD thesis, but it's nothing scientific. So it's just practices, and it's exactly that. So many different associations or even community groups, they decided to build something and to act and to improve something that they felt the need in their lives. And it somehow got in this book, and you see so many nice examples. For example, there's one to help people with diabetes to identify what is healthier or less healthy for them to eat. And they do this with cards, and it's like a game. And it's very interesting how wide this can be, and how they could really reach all this variety of examples in one book. And I am not sure if the person that created these cards was really thinking, aha, I will create here a social innovation, or this person just thought, I want to help these people and maybe do something more easy and interesting that can be playful and they can learn about their health. And at the end, you see this agency thought this is a very cool social innovation, and it could be expanded and used by other people. Yeah.
True. Actually, this makes me think of one of the startup companies at Blue Factory. Don't remember the name. They're working on also gamification for certain like addiction treatments or addiction prevention. So, which is also maybe a little bit in the same direction. I don't know. Maybe Virginie, you remember the name of the company? Virginie is from Blue Factory. I see she's online. Okay, not listening.
Yeah, I don't know this project. What do they do? What's the project about?
I think they had a mandate to develop a game to. I'm not sure if it was mainly on prevention or treatment of addictions or both. And I think it was about different kind of addictions. It can be either like screen time on video games, but also like other like alcohol or other kinds of food. Maybe it was also linked to food disorders. But honestly, I'm not sure anymore. So
interesting. Yeah, very interesting. I also saw there's the European Commission started with European Social Innovation Competition. So this is for all entrepreneurs with a social innovation idea, so they can also promote their idea and get finance for having a social innovation. And I think such financial support, and also they provide support to develop the idea itself. So I think this is also a push into social innovation projects. It's of course very important to develop the scientific field, but it is at the end the practical actions that will bring a concrete change in society. So it's also interesting to analyze the field on the theory and maybe make it more clear for the practitioners. But this investments and the real cases, I think they're the most interesting to see how they are changing people's lives.
And perhaps also to bring people, as Martin said, they don't know they're doing a social innovation, but perhaps understand that they are doing something, and then take the right tools to make it more, to promise a little bit more for the success. That could be one outcome of the PhD thesis.
Yeah,
that's a good point, and I think there are certainly a number of tools around that would be relevant, but are currently perceived as being targeting only commercial projects. So then they would not be well perceived or not be identified as useful by people more engaged in the social projects. They would say, no, that this is for business, that's not for me, not for us. And so making these just adapting them so that they are not perceived as something that is purely for making money. That would maybe be one interesting avenue as well.
Yeah, and also you need at the end, also for social innovation, you need a little bit of a measuring. It's perhaps a different measuring than perhaps money or something like that, but you need something to show that you have a certain impact with your idea, and that it's really something bringing to the society. I say it once again. Yeah, so I think this is what is interesting. Okay, if there's no other questions, then I hand over to you, Martin, or to you, Laura.
Yes, actually, we'll go over to the buffet, which is already set up in the Blue Hall. Everyone who is present at Blue Factory here, you're of course, as usual, invited to join for the lunch. That is traditionally following our lunch seminars, the Smart Living lunches. So we can happily continue our discussion informally around the lunch buffet. Is there anything else to add, Laure?
No, thank you very much, Julia, for the presentation. I have a few questions that I will keep for the lunch.
Oh, you're cheating!
That's the point. Let's meet all together at the Blue Hall.
That's unfair.
No, well, I was wondering, Julia, because the scientific publication number is pretty low regarding to the broadness of the topic. So do you think the need is, well, if we would like to see more scientific publication on the topic, social innovation, do we need more social scientists to be interested in innovation, or more technologists or innovators who get interested in social aspects?
Yeah, I think both, actually. It's very interesting to have more people trying to develop social innovation projects, more researchers looking into social innovation. I think this can be done in so many different areas. Many researchers that investigate energy, they can also try to develop some technical innovation that would also bring social change. And this is very clear with many of the current innovations we have so far, how they can address social issues. So it's something that should be done, but I think it also has connection with investment. So I try to look in the literature when they always say this last 10 years, there was an explosion of social innovation articles. And I think this is pretty much connected with how the European community put some money into it, in this research, how the US put some money into this research, and now you can find everywhere around in the world a new organization that is trying to develop social innovation. And sometimes they get also financing from private companies that are also interested in having something social in their strategy. So they pay this association so they can get help for developing a project. So I think it's connected with people that want to take action, researchers that are interested in the topic, and also some financing to make everything move. Because you see, normally innovation, which is technical innovation, it's more interesting for the companies, for example, if they want to develop the new iPhone, you know. So it's probably because also the technical innovation has a history of having a lot more finance behind, that it also developed faster. But that's a personal opinion.
Well, thank you anyway for working on the topic. It will make the number growing of scientific publication.
Yeah, you'll compensate for the lack of publications, Julia.
Okay, so just as a reminder, you will find this presentation is on YouTube afterwards. It's kind of a private link, so you just need the link to see the talk. But just if you want to share it afterwards with other researchers, feel free.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much again, all of you that stayed and joined the presentation and that went through with the theory part with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julia.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.